Welcome to the Empowered Parenting for Emotional Wellness podcast. I'm your host, Dawn Day, a mom who believes in the power of education to bring hope and light to our families' lives. Through interviews with mental health experts and advocates, we will learn how to best support emotional resilience in our children, tweens, and teens. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. I have Jennifer Meyer here with us today, and she is a therapist in Fort Collins, Colorado. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you for having me.
So we are going to talk about bullying today. And you work with a lot of adolescents, I believe, that are bullied. Is that right?
I do work with adolescents that have been bullied, and I've also presented to over at CSU during non-COVID times in the summers. They do a program for middle school aged girls, and they include bullying, anti-bullying program in that, and I've presented to them for a few years, so I enjoy it.
Very neat. So you know a lot about bullying then, because you've
Yes.
worked with people and you've presented this topic. So,
Yes.
okay, so how many kids are bullied out there? What's the percentage?
So it's right around 20%. So 1 in 5 children report having been bullied. That's a pretty recent statistic as of 2019.
Okay. And so what are the forms of bullying that kids are seeing right now? Like, I know there's a lot of online things that go on now, but, how do kids get bullied?
Right. So there's physical bullying, which is what we would think of in terms of kicking, pushing, shoving, even spitting on people, pulling hair, things like that. There's cyberbullying, which is becoming more and more prevalent, unfortunately, which includes everything from making someone the subject of false online rumors, false accusations, impersonation, inappropriate pictures. There's also verbal bullying, which is name calling, teasing, intimidation, making homophobic, racist remarks, remarks about somebody's weight or body shape, things like that.
So the one that I didn't understand was impersonation. So what does that mean are you pretending to be someone and you say things they wouldn't say and you try to shame them? Is that what that means?
Yes.
Okay.
And so it would be something like creating a fake profile under someone's name that you want to get back at. A lot of times I see it with girls trying to make them out to be slutty or sleazy and trying to get, sometimes posting pictures that don't belong to them or somehow getting access to a photo and then spreading it everywhere and acting as if you're that person.
Okay. So a lot of I've seen shaming with kids' photos. So what happens with that kind of thing? Like, what is the scenario usually that's going on there? Does someone share personally and they think it's between the two of them, and then
Yes.
the person turns around and then just shares it with the world? Is that what
Yes.
happens?
So here's an example. So let's say that a girl is in a relationship with a boy and she sends him a picture of, some sort of private picture of her body. Let's say that they break up and this guy shares that picture with the whole school. I've seen things like that. I've seen, you name it. I've seen people share pictures that don't have a face and saying that it's another person.
So then it might not be that person, but they're just trying to humiliate them.
Right.
And shame
Right.
them.
Yes.
Ugh. So what happens then with someone who is bullied emotionally? Like, what kind of damage can happen to a person,
Right. So if someone is being bullied, a lot of times I would see increased fear, not wanting to go to school becomes usually, an issue, of course, because school or the school bus or walking to school, whatever that is, wherever the bullying is occurring, we want to avoid that because it's causing a lot of fear and upset. And so avoidance of those things, shutting down, withdrawing, sometimes not talking about it.
So they kind of, do you think that's more common, is the withdrawal kind of behavior? Is that what you see more than anything, that people are just going to shut down and stay to themselves? Yes. So it's shaming, right? Wouldn't you say the whole thing is about shaming people, bullying?
It's a big part of it. It's a big part of it. So I see the withdrawal quite a bit. A lot of times it's it changes the way the victim of bullying sees themselves. So a lot of times bullying is about a perceived a difference, or there's a power imbalance between the person that's bullying and the person that is being bullied. And so shame, withdrawal from school, grades going down, depression, anxiety, all kinds of things like that. Occasionally it can lead to physical illness, and a small percentage of bullied children can then go on and, it's like after it has happened so many times, sometimes they want to get revenge on the people that have been bullying them, which it's a very small percentage of it, but sometimes that leads to things as awful as a school shooting. So it's just making sure that we take good care of our children and making sure things get reported, and schools are doing a much better job these days of teaching kids about it. Anti-bullying programs are shown, the anti-bullying, like the prevention programs are shown to bring bullying down by 25%. So they're actually working. And also targeting that in our homes and just making sure that we're teaching empathy and that people are different and it's okay.
So what are you teaching when you go out and present? What is the gist of your program? Are you educating kids on what it is or how not to be an abuser or a bullier, I would say, because I think bullying is a form of abuse. But would you say that bullying is a form of abuse, first of all? It
Yes.
is. So it's someone trying to be in power over another person.
Yes.
So in
Yes.
that way, it is abusive. Okay, so what are you trying to teach them the signs of it? Are you trying to teach them how to stand up to it, report it? Like, what are you sharing with them when you go to the schools?
So I teach about what bullying is, which is bullying is unwanted aggressive behavior among school-age children that involves a real or perceived power imbalance. And it's a behavior that's repeated over time or has the potential to be repeated over time. So I talk about what it is, what the types are. And since the presentations that I've given have been to middle school girls, I talk a lot about what that looks like between girls according to the statistics, which is a lot more social, emotional, and cyberbullying. So how to recognize it, what to do if you have been bullied, or if you're a bystander, what to do to help a friend or help somebody else that you see that is being bullied. So bystanders actually have a lot of power to be able to help.
So what do you tell the bystanders to do? Report it?
So to tell a teacher, or if they feel safe, it kind of depends on the type of bullying. Sometimes people can say something to the bully that's not always appropriate or safe. But it's a lot of times children or, adolescents that do have a friend with them are less likely to be targeted by a bully. And so it's recognizing, just try to stay with somebody through the day, on the bus if possible, because people tend to be bullied when they're alone.
So sad. Kids, I mean, if someone's like severely bullied, it can affect their life to the point of depression, which to me, depression is the main precursor to being suicidal. So it's like one of the main causes, obviously, of being suicidal. So I feel like bullying can cause suicidal behavior too.
Right. It can lead to that. Yes.
Yeah. So one of the podcast guests that I'm having is an ex-cop from Florida, and he knew of these gals who were these young women who had been bullied with photos, and they both committed suicide, both of them. It's very sad. So I do think there can be times where it becomes so devastating for the victim that they become severely depressed, and as a result of that, it can be that they become even suicidal or take their life, which is tragic.
Yes.
So
very tragic.
It's horrible. So you do work with people who are bullied. Do you think that long-term extreme bullying can create mental illness over time?
Absolutely.
So what do you see for mental illness that arises as a result? What are you seeing?
So depression and anxiety are probably the top things that I do see in my practice. And as you just said, depression can lead to suicide attempts. It can lead to suicidality, suicidal ideation. It's just we need to make sure to give lots of support and understanding, and make sure, that in schools and as parents that we're making sure that this gets reported and that schools are following up on it. So one of the things that I teach kids is to report it and tell a safe adult. And if nothing's being done, tell another adult. Tell another adult. Keep talking until something gets done.
So what can you do? I mean, how, there's parents out there that have kids that bully, right? So what would you tell a parent to, how do we prevent our kids from becoming bullies, to begin
Yeah.
with?
A lot of trying to prevent our kids from bullying is teaching empathy, which is trying to put ourselves in other people's shoes, especially people who are different from us. That's a big thing when it comes to bullying, is this perceived power imbalance, or this notion that other people are weak and that we're going to pick on them and it makes us feel better. So unfortunately, in homes where kids are not getting enough attention, or they're seeing that, let's say, mom or dad is a bully, toward other people, then they learn that behavior. So a lot of it is just modeling empathic behavior, and holding them to consequences when they show that they're bullying someone else or bullying a sibling.
Right. Don't let them get away with it, because it can be so damaging. It's crazy.
Right. And making sure that we talk to them about that. And sometimes, we have mean moments, we call them, everybody does, and our kids are going to have those too. And that's not necessarily bullying. It's more, we need to learn from this before this becomes a pattern of aggressive behavior that we would call bullying. So nipping it in the bud, teaching.
So lashing out is in itself is not bullying, unless it's a pattern of over time where you do that over and over to someone or other people.
Right.
Okay. Because it is, like, we've talked about this, but it's normal to be frustrated and maybe lash out in anger, but it's not normal to do it over and over. And with the intent sometimes of literally harming them. Because that's what they really want to do, is hurt them emotionally, especially. So hold on one second. I was just thinking about, you had talked about how, maybe a lack of empathy might be a reason that kids are bullying. So if we teach them to be empathetic, then that curtails that behavior. Is there another root cause that a bully inside themselves might have issues, and that's why they're bullying? Like, what are some of the reasons that kids do bully other kids?
A lot of times not getting enough attention at home, or it could be that there's some sort of violence going on at home. And so these children have learned that picking on other people is the way that we deal with inner conflict or frustration. We take this out on other people. So they've sometimes learned that. Sometimes they're not getting enough attention. Like I said, it could be any number of things that are happening.
So do you think it could be also a need for having power? Because maybe they have no power at home, because they're being abused or something. And
Absolutely.
so they're in this powerless situation, so they want to take power over someone else, maybe.
Yes.
So could that be another reason?
Yes. And sometimes, unfortunately, I see, kids get into a bullying situation where it makes them cool with their friends because they're being, dominant over other people. And so they try to show off.
Right. And it gets applauded by that group. And it's just like a toxic kind of encouragement of behavior.
Yes.
So pick your friends wisely too, right? If you have mean friends, stay away, right? Because kindness is kind of underrated. Not overrated, underrated.
I agree.
I just think if we taught kids to be kind, if we just did that, that would solve so many problems.
Yes, I agree with you. And I think teaching empathy, starting when our children are very, very young, and helping them understand, what does it feel like to be on the other end of that behavior? what if someone else did this to you, what you just did? What would that feel like? And teaching them to feel for other people.
Right.
And I agree, it's not really an applauded characteristic these days. We have a more competitive society in a lot of ways, but teaching empathy and understanding, and also being able to tolerate differences, that people are different and that there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually something to be applauded. We
Right.
can learn from people that are different.
Right. Celebrate it and embrace it and learn from other people's differences instead of being like, oh, you're not like me, or you don't fit into this group because you dress different, or,
Right.
that kind of thing. It's really surprising where bullying comes from. Sometimes I was a teacher for 12 years and I had a little group of girls that were, straight A girls and all this. You wouldn't think that they would be, bullies. And on the playground, it became apparent in some of my parent conferences that there were a lot of miserable kids. Like they didn't want to go to recess anymore. And what was happening was this band of girls was getting together, and this is only 5th grade. I mean, I'm talking 11 and 12, or it was just, they're so young to be doing this, and they were ridiculing people for their shoes. And, I mean, like, it's just, it seems so trivial, but it's so harmful and so hurtful to the
Yes.
child who's being ridiculed because they're being ostracized,
Right.
So I pulled these girls aside and they were mortified because these weren't kids that got in trouble. They were,
Right.
pleasers and this and that, but their behavior collectively became bullying. And it was very sad to see. But they were, it was a wake up call for them for their own behavior. It was like, wait, this is actually called bullying, what you're doing.
Right.
And they were like, oh, like, I'm not a bully. Yeah, you are. You are a bully. You are actually bullying people by, ridiculing what they're wearing and things like that. It's just very mean, very sad to see it, So they were just, and all it was a simple, firm but gentle calling out of it, and they were just like, whoa, okay, thank you, like we won't do this again. And it curtailed the behavior, and it was just a teacher's intervention. See, that's what I feel is missing, is online, right? There's nobody, there's no adults there like saying, oh, you know what, Johnny, you shouldn't talk like that. Even you see it with adult conversations when people start arguing about something. People start, calling people names or jabbing at them or personally attacking them instead of like discussing the differences of opinion anymore. It becomes personal. And so with the children, there's no adults online saying, hey, kids, hey, Susie, hey, Johnny, like, oh, okay, let's keep it nice, let's be friendly, let's be kind. It just goes unchecked, right? So I think that the online world has created this culture of rampant bullying because there's nobody out there looking at it. So these kids are just doing it. And, I think that when you're sitting there typing on your computer all day or on your phone, and that's the kind of attitude that you're like putting forth, you get in these little arguments or whatever they are, start picking on people. I think that's what encourages it in real life too, because it's being allowed because no one even really knows it's happening online.
Correct. And I think it's easier to type something online because there's not quite that accountability as opposed to saying something to someone in person. But that's all of this is why it's so important to be open and non-judgmental so that when our children are experiencing this, they can come and tell us, whether it's something that's been directed at them or one of their friends. And that's often how we find out is, one of our kids will come home and say, my friend was targeted by this and somebody told her that she should kill herself. And so then which I hear all too frequently, and it's just disgusting and upsetting. And
oh my gosh,
make sure that these children are getting the support they need and making sure that those, the kids doing this are being held accountable and learning from this. It's different. It's harder to track down that,
just think about it. How devastating that is when someone tells you, like, you're so unworthy, you should go kill yourself. I mean, that is so devastating.
Yes.
And that breaks my heart because kids are already depressed, and some of them are already suicidal. So if they hear that word or that little thing, like somebody said, you're worthless, you should go kill yourself, that could be the tipping point.
It could.
It's just sad. It really, and it's unfathomable that people say that to each other.
It is. It
Like,
is.
what are you thinking when you say that? I don't get it. Like, do you really want them to do that? Well, like, how would you feel if they did?
Right.
So I think that a part of it is the kids don't realize that actions and words have consequences sometimes, and what you
Yes.
say actually can affect someone to the point of being devastating. And if they really realize that, I think maybe they would think twice.
Right.
So hopefully part of it is the education of that,
Right.
Ugh, it's just sad. I don't know, the kindness thing to me. So missing, it's like, let's be kind. Okay, so how do you work with kids that have been bullied to, help them reclaim kind of their power over the bully?
So I work with them to, number one, find out more about the situation, make sure that it gets reported at school so that it can be dealt with. A lot of this is just helping them understand why kids bully. And so kind of like with child abuse, it's not necessarily that there's even something wrong with you as a child. It's what's going on with this kid that wants to bully you. What is it? What's happening? And maybe there's something happening with this kid that's bullying, that's causing this behavior, making this kid need to feel like he or she needs more power. And so part of it is understanding it. Part of it is some behavioral practical suggestions, like trying to make sure that you're not alone, trying to avoid, certain places where kids are bullied, trying to figure out how you can tackle those places. So if kids are bullied in the hallway, it's finding a different route. It's, going with a friend, making sure that you're talking to parents and that you're getting the support you need basically all around you, letting teachers know, school counselors, really just creating a wraparound approach to make sure that this gets dealt with on the, from the adult level, and also just working with self-esteem and resilience.
So you're kind of almost like you're buffering against it. So you're kind of shoring up, having literally people around you. That's even like a physical, like, bumper against, them approaching you, but also shoring yourself up emotionally. Does anybody ever come to you for help with being a bully? Does anybody ever, or is it mostly people that have been hurt by a bully? Like it doesn't seem like the bullies are the ones that seek the help unless they have other issues, or I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so in my experience, I tend to work with people that are more the victims of bullying or abuse or other things like that, just because it affects them differently. And I think just in my practice, I tend to work more with victims of abuse. And so I tend to draw more of that into my practice. When it does come to the kids that are bullying, I think some of them do seek help after something has happened that has created a consequence or some sort of sort of a fall, so to speak,
Right.
that makes them aware that something needs to be changed.
Right. So maybe they've had a revelation that their actions are actually hurting people, and maybe they've had a attack of conscience, or they just want to change because it just doesn't feel good to be that person, right?
Right.
We all know what feels better deep down. It's just a matter of listening to our intuition and, knowing how to address, our own behavior accordingly.
Right.
Tough stuff. So, okay. So do you have a message to parents or a message of hope for the bullied children, or if a parent's child is being bullied, like, is there something you'd like to say for just a final piece of advice, maybe?
Yes. Yeah. So I think ultimately, when it comes to parents, what I would really strongly encourage is, number one, just make sure that you've created a safe environment at home where there's support, where you're all open in terms of talking and listening. And there's a regular check-in time about what's going on, what's going well at school, what's not going well. we talk about things, discuss conflict, always come back to what happened with conflict and follow through on it, repair the conflict. That's an important part. As I said earlier, teaching and modeling empathy, particularly toward others who are different, and understanding people that are different. That's really important. Healthy consequences. If your child has bullied another one, follow through, nipping that in the bud. Explaining why it's not okay and explaining what that does to the other child or children that are being bullied. Explain what the consequence is. And then just also teaching our children how to manage really difficult feelings and how to deal with adversity, so that we create emotionally resilient kids.
Yeah, very
Not
important.
protecting them from difficulties, but helping them learn how to deal with it.
Right. I think that's really the biggest thing you can do just generally to create emotional wellness in your child is the resilience part, because you can't always protect them from anything ever happening, but you can teach them how to react more resiliently,
Yes.
with more resiliency, I guess.
Yes.
So when you talk about differences, who are the people that people are bullying? Is it LGBTQ? Is it racial? Is it disabilities? Like what?
Yes.
Who's being bullied?
So all of the above. There's, yes, definitely. So based on race, based on LGBTQ, sometimes it's a gender thing. It's sometimes it's a religion thing. Sometimes, yes, like you said, disabilities. There are all different types of things like that make kids different, so to speak. That creates a target, which is so unfortunate.
Sad.
Which is so unfortunate.
It's
Sometimes
very sad.
it's a popularity thing in terms of we're going to group together and use the popularity as the power differential. It can be all different types of things, size, different things like that.
What was the last thing?
Size. Let's say that this kid is much bigger.
Oh, size. Yeah.
Size.
Yeah. So just physically looking different, like having some thing, that's different, or it's just something that can be picked on and be ridiculed, basically.
Right.
So if
Anything.
you're not fitting in the mold of being normal, quote unquote,
Right.
what they deem to be like acceptable, then they bully you for that reason.
Right. So I really work with adolescents to be basically, if you're accepted and popular, it's not good to be like everybody else. We're all unique and complex, and it's good to be yourself. And even though you don't feel that right now and experience that right now, eventually you'll get to a point where that's a good thing.
Right.
We like people that are fully themselves.
Right, because I think the fear is not fitting in when you're that age.
Yes.
It's so important to be like, ooh,
Yes.
like that you fit in. So if people were more open and accepting, then more, then everybody could fit in, because it's like,
Yes.
it's okay. You can just be who you are and it's fine.
Course.
So very neat. All right. Well, thank you so much for all your work with these kids and, trying to help educate people. And thank you for taking the time to help educate us. And it's definitely eye-opening. And it is something that does need to be addressed still. It's sad that it even still happens. It's been going on forever, And unfortunately, I think it's a human nature thing. So I think we need to kind of counteract it.
Yes. But thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. Remember, parents, we can empower ourselves through education. I believe that knowledge brings power, hope, and light. Let's do all we can to ensure that our children lead the happy, healthy lives that they deserve. This is my mission, and this is my heart. See you next time. Find out more at hopefuldawn.com.